The massive space station turned slowly in the void between stars. Its metal hull stretched for miles in every direction, covered with docking bays and communication towers. Ships from across the galaxy came and went like busy insects around a hive. This was Nexus Prime, the neutral meeting ground where alien races gathered to trade, talk, and show off their latest weapons. Inside the station's biggest conference hall, 5 different alien species had set up displays of their most powerful warships. The room buzzed with energy as holographic projections showed massive battleships floating in space. Each alien commander stood proudly next to their display, ready to prove their species was the strongest in the galaxy. Admiral Crystal of the Vorthic Empire stood 8 feet tall on 4 powerful legs. His red skin gleamed under the bright lights, and his forearms moved constantly as he spoke. Behind him, a hologram showed his flagship, the Devastator-class battleship Blood of Conquest. The ship stretched over a kilometer long, its hull covered in glowing plasma cannons that could melt entire cities. "Look upon the might of the Vorthic Empire," Crystal declared, his voice booming through the hall. "Our plasma weapons burn at temperatures hotter than most stars. No armor can stand against us. No shield can stop our fire. We have conquered 47 worlds with ships like this one." The other alien commanders watched with barely hidden jealousy. Each thought their own ships were better, but they had to admit the Vorthic battleship looked dangerous. Its weapons glowed with deadly energy, and its armor was thick enough to ram through asteroids. Next to Crystal stood Shard Singer Velanov of the Crystalline Hegemony. Her body looked like living crystal, clear and sharp, with light flowing through her like water. She made musical sounds when she moved, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Her display showed geometric ships that looked more like works of art than weapons of war. "Beauty and power combined," Velanov sang, her voice like crystal bells. "Our prism dreadnoughts use focused light to cut through any target. Our crystal shields can bend energy attacks back at our enemies. We do not simply destroy, we create magnificence in battle." Her ships were indeed beautiful. They had perfect geometric shapes with crystal surfaces that split light into rainbow colors. But the weapons they carried could focus starlight into beams sharp enough to slice planets in half. The shields around each ship sparkled like diamonds, ready to turn any attack into harmless light. The third display belonged to Nexus 7 of the Biomechanical Collective. The creature looked like a mixture of machine and living tissue, with metal parts growing out of flesh and organic tubes connecting to electronic systems. It spoke in a flat, emotionless voice that came from speakers built into its throat. "Biological perfection merged with mechanical precision," Nexus 7 stated. "Our Leviathan ships are alive. They grow stronger with each battle. They heal their wounds. They learn from their enemies. Death only makes them more powerful." The hologram showed ships that looked more like giant sea creatures than traditional spacecraft. They had organic hulls that pulsed like heartbeats, weapon pods that moved like tentacles, and hull sections that could regrow if damaged. These living ships could adapt to any situation, becoming exactly what they needed to be for each fight. Phasewalker Zillan of the Quantum Phantoms was hard to look at directly. Her body seemed to exist in several dimensions at once, shifting and blurring like a mirage. Sometimes she appeared solid, sometimes she was just a shadow, and sometimes she seemed to be in 2 places at the same time. Her voice echoed as if it came from far away. "Reality bends to our will," Zillan whispered, her words seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere. "Our ghost fleet exists between dimensions. We strike from spaces that do not exist. We are everywhere and nowhere. How do you fight an enemy you cannot see or touch?" Her ships were the strangest of all. They flickered in and out of existence, sometimes solid, sometimes transparent, sometimes completely invisible. They could phase through solid matter, appear behind enemy lines without warning, and attack from angles that should not exist. Fighting them would be like trying to hit smoke with a sword. The last display belonged to Warchief Grondar of the Titanforge Republic. He was a massive creature, 12 feet tall and covered in thick armor plating that looked like it was part of his body. His voice rumbled like falling rocks, and each step he took shook the floor. Behind him, his hologram showed the largest ships in the room. "Size matters," Grondar growled, his words shaking the air. "Our battle stations are mobile fortresses. Each one carries the firepower of an entire fleet. Our armor is so thick that enemy weapons break against it like waves against a mountain. We do not dodge attacks, we absorb them and ask for more." His ships were enormous, some as large as small moons. They bristled with thousands of weapons and were covered in armor, plates thicker than most buildings. These were not ships meant for speed or tricks. They were designed to sit in space and blast everything around them into dust while shrugging off any return fire. The 5 alien commanders looked at each other with barely hidden competitive spirit. Each was certain their approach to warfare was the best. The Vorthek believed in raw firepower. The crystallines trusted in elegant precision. The biomechanicals relied on adaptive evolution. The quantum phantoms used dimensional trickery. The Titanforge depended on overwhelming size and armor as they compared their ships and bragged about past victories. A small group of newcomers entered the hall. 3 humans walked quietly through the crowds of aliens, trying not to draw attention to themselves. They wore simple gray uniforms with small badges that marked them as representatives of Earth. Captain Taehyun Park led the group. He was a middle-aged man with calm eyes and steady hands. Behind him walked Commander Sojin Kim, a sharp-eyed woman who seemed to notice everything around her. The 3rd human was Engineer Woo-Bin Lee, a younger man who carried a datapad and kept taking notes on everything he saw. The aliens barely noticed the humans at first. When they did, their reactions ranged from mild curiosity to open dismissal. Humans were a new species in galactic politics, having only achieved faster-than-light travel a few decades ago. Most aliens considered them primitive and harmless. "Ah." The newcomers, Admiral Crystal said, his tone suggesting he was talking about interesting pets rather than fellow sapient beings. "Have you come to observe how real civilizations wage war?" Captain Taehyun bowed politely. "We are honored to be invited to this gathering. We hope to learn much from your presentations." This response caused ripples of amusement among the alien commanders. They interpreted the humans' polite words as admission of inferiority. After all, a truly advanced species would be showing off their own weapons, not asking to learn from others. "Tell us," Shard Singer Velanoff sang, her crystal voice tinkling with barely concealed laughter, "what mighty vessels does humanity bring to display? Surely you have some examples of your military prowess to share?" Captain Taehyun exchanged a quick glance with his companions. Commander Sojin's expression remained perfectly neutral, but Engineer Woo-Bin seemed to be suppressing a smile. "Our ships are not quite ready for display," Captain Taehyun replied diplomatically. "We prefer to observe and learn from more experienced civilizations." This answer triggered open laughter from several of the alien commanders. War Chief Grondar's rumbling chuckle made the floor vibrate, while Phasewalker Zillan's echoing giggles seemed to come from several dimensions at once. "How refreshing," Nexus 7 stated in its flat voice. "A species that knows its limitations." The humans stood quietly as the aliens continued their presentations, apparently content to watch and take notes. They asked few questions and made no challenges to anything they heard. To the gathered alien commanders, this confirmed everything they believed about humanity, that they were a young, weak species with nothing significant to contribute to galactic civilization. But if any of the aliens had looked more carefully, they might have noticed that the humans were not just watching randomly. Captain Taehyun's eyes tracked the technical specifications being shared. Commander Sojin seemed particularly interested in weapon placement and defensive systems. Engineer Woo-Bin's note-taking became more intense. Whenever power output and energy consumption were discussed, the humans were indeed learning from the presentations, but perhaps not in the way the aliens expected. The presentations continued for several hours, with each alien species trying to outdo the others. As the displays grew more elaborate, the comments about humanity became more pointed and cruel. What had started as mild amusement was turning Into open mockery, Admiral Krickstall activated a new holographic display showing detailed scans of human vessels. The images showed small, boxy ships with simple designs and basic weapons. Compared to the sleek alien warships, they looked like children's toys made from scrap metal. "These are humanity's most advanced warships," Krickstall announced, his forearms gesturing dismissively at the holograms. "Primitive kinetic weapons that fire simple metal projectiles. Chemical rockets for propulsion. No energy shields, no plasma. Cannons, no adaptive technology. They might as well be throwing rocks." The other aliens gathered around the display, studying the human ships with the same interest they might show in ancient museum pieces. War Chief Grondar leaned forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over the projections. "Look at this armor," he rumbled, pointing at the human ship's hull. "Simple steel alloys, maybe some ceramic plating. My people discarded such materials thousands of years ago. A single shot from our plasma cannons would melt through their entire fleet." Shardsinger Velanoth's crystal body chimed with what sounded like laughter. "Their largest ship is barely 300 meters long. Our scout vessels are larger than their flagship. How do they expect to compete in galactic politics with such inadequate tools?" Phase Walker Zillen flickered in and out of phase as she examined the human weapon systems. "Missiles and railguns," she said, her voice echoing with disdain. "Technology that relies on physical projectiles moving through normal space. Our ships exist partially outside normal dimensions. Their weapons could not even touch us, much less damage us. Nexus 7 processed the data with mechanical precision, analysis complete. Human technology is approximately 500 years behind current galactic standards. Their ships lack basic defensive systems that even primitive civilizations possess. Estimated combat effectiveness against any galactic military force, 0.03%. The mathematical certainty in the biomechanical's voice made the dismissal even more cutting. It was not opinion or prejudice, according to Nexus 7's calculations. Humanity was simply irrelevant as a military force. Captain Taehyun stood quietly through all of this, his expression never changing. Commander Sojin kept her hands clasped behind her back, but those watching closely might have noticed her knuckles were white with tension. Engineer Wu Bin continued taking notes, though his pen pressed harder against the paper than before. "Captain Park," Admiral Krickstall said, turning to face the human delegation directly. "Surely you do not expect to participate in galactic security matters with such limited resources? Perhaps humanity would be better served focusing on trade and cultural exchange rather than military fantasies." Before Captain Taehyun could respond, War Chief Grondar stepped forward. His massive armored body towered over the humans, and his voice carried the weight of countless battles. "I have fought against hundreds of different species," he growled. "I have seen every type of weapon, every kind of ship, every possible strategy. Your people are barely evolved primitives playing with toys. You have no business discussing warfare with civilizations that have perfected the art of destruction." The insult hung in the air like a physical weight. Several other alien observers, who had gathered to watch the presentations, murmured their agreement. Some even laughed openly at the comparison between humans and primitive animals. Shardsinger Velanoth's crystal voice took on a patronizing tone. "Perhaps we are being too harsh. After all, every species must start somewhere. Give humanity another 1,000 years of development, and they might create ships worthy of being called vessels of war. Until then, they should leave such matters to their betters." Phase Walker Zillen's form solidified just enough to appear more substantial. "The galaxy is a dangerous place," she said, her words seeming to come from empty air around the humans. "Species that cannot protect themselves often find themselves absorbed those who can. It would be unfortunate if humanity's ignorance led to their extinction." The threat was subtle but clear. Several alien species had expanded their territory by conquering weaker neighbors. The Quantum Phantoms were particularly known for making entire civilizations simply disappear. Claimed by beings that existed between dimensions. Nexus to 7 added its own cold analysis. Historical data indicates that species with inferior military technology survive an average of 237 years after first contact with galactic civilization. Humanity has existed in galactic politics for 43 years. Statistical probability suggests they have less than 2 centuries remaining before absorption or elimination. Captain Tehain finally spoke, his voice calm and measured despite the insults. We appreciate your concern for humanity's welfare. However, we are more resilient than we might appear. Earth has taught us many lessons about survival. This response triggered another wave of laughter from the assembled aliens. Admiral Krickstall's 4 arms waved dismissively. Earth, he repeated mockingly. A single world barely out of its own gravity well. Most of our civilizations span hundreds of systems. The Vorthak Empire alone controls 47 worlds and their associated resources. What could one small planet possibly teach that is worth knowing? War Chief Grondar's laugh shook the deck plating. Survival lessons from a species that nearly destroyed itself with primitive nuclear weapons? A people so backward they still fight wars on the surface of their own planet? You speak of resilience, but your history shows nothing but chaos and self-destruction. The aliens had clearly studied human history, but they interpreted it as evidence of primitiveness rather than strength. They saw Earth's many wars as proof of humanity's inability to evolve beyond violence, not as experience that had forged them into effective fighters. Shard singer Velenoth's crystal form chimed with musical mockery. Your species has never faced a real threat. You have fought only yourselves with weapons that could barely damage a modern ship's paint. How do you expect to survive against enemies who can reshape reality itself? Engineer Wu Bin looked up from his notes for the first time since the presentations began. His young face showed none of the anger that Commander Sojin was clearly fighting to control. Instead, he seemed almost curious about the alien's certainty. You mentioned reshaping reality, he said politely to Phase Walker Zillan. That sounds like it requires enormous amounts of energy. How do you generate and control such power? Zillan's form flickered with what might have been surprise at the question. Our quantum generators tap into the energy differentials between dimensions. The power available is theoretically unlimited, though practical applications require sophisticated control systems. Wu Bin nodded and made another note. And the plasma weapons of the Vorthak Empire, they must generate incredible heat. How do you manage the thermal dynamics without damaging your own ships? Admiral Krickstall seemed pleased by the technical question. Magnetic containment fields and exotic matter cooling systems. The technology is far beyond your current understanding, but perhaps in time your species might develop something similar. The condescending tone suggested that Krickstall believed humans would need centuries to understand even the basics of Vorthak technology. Other aliens nodded their agreement. The question sounded like a primitive student asking about concepts too advanced for their comprehension. Commander Sojin finally spoke, her voice carefully controlled. These are impressive achievements. Each of your civilizations has clearly mastered different aspects of advanced warfare. We are honored to observe such demonstrations of superior technology. Her words were perfectly diplomatic, but something in her tone made several aliens look at her more carefully. There was a quality to her voice that suggested she was choosing her words very precisely, perhaps not saying everything she was thinking. Nexus 7's mechanical sensors focused on the human commander. Query: does the human delegation wish to share any information about their own military capabilities? Even primitive data would be useful for our historical records. Captain Tehain exchanged another quick glance with his companions. For just a moment, something passed between them, a look that suggested they were sharing some private knowledge that the aliens could not access. Our capabilities are modest. By galactic standards, Captain Tehain replied carefully. We prefer to learn from others rather than make claims we cannot support. Perhaps it is better to remain quiet and be thought primitive than to speak and remove all doubt. The human proverb was lost on most of the aliens, but the meaning seemed clear enough. Humanity was admitting its inferiority and asking to be left alone to observe. This response satisfied the alien commanders, who returned to their own discussions about superior technology and advanced warfare, but if any of them had studied human expressions more carefully, they might have noticed that Engineer Wu Bin was no longer just taking notes about alien technology. His datapad now showed complex calculations involving energy output, power generation, and what looked like targeting solutions. Commander Sojin's carefully neutral expression hid the fact that she was. The mockery of humanity might have continued for hours, but it was suddenly interrupted by an urgent alarm that echoed through the space station. Red warning lights flashed in every corridor, and automated voices began broadcasting emergency messages in dozens of alien languages. Priority alert. Unknown massive object detected approaching from deep space. All military vessels report to battle stations immediately. This is not a drill. The alien commanders stopped their boasting and turned toward the nearest communication console. A holographic display materialized in the center of the room, showing a long-range sensor reading that made everyone fall silent. Something enormous was moving toward them from the darkness between stars. The object was larger than most space stations, its surface covered with weapon emplacements and armor plating that looked ancient but still dangerous. Strange energy readings pulsed from its core, and its trajectory aimed directly at the Kepler 442 system, Admiral Krikstal S4. Arms moved quickly over his personal command interface, pulling up detailed scans. His red skin grew darker as he studied the readings. "By the fire of conquest," he whispered. "That is a void harvester." The name sent a chill through the assembled aliens. Even the humans could feel the sudden change in atmosphere as seasoned. Warriors who had been laughing moments before now looked genuinely afraid. War Chief Grondar's massive frame straightened to its full height. "Impossible. The harvesters were destroyed millions of years ago when the ancient civilization fell. They are myths, stories told to frighten young warriors." Shard singer Velenov's crystal body rang with discordant notes as stress affected her harmonic resonance. The readings are consistent with historical records. Automated war machine, designed to consume entire star systems for raw materials. Self-repairing, self-improving, utterly without mercy. Phasewalker Zelen flickered rapidly between dimensions, her form becoming increasingly unstable as she processed the implications. If it reaches Kepler 442, over 2 billion civilians will die. The colonies there have no military defenses worth mentioning. Nexus 7's mechanical voice remained flat, but the speed of its analysis revealed growing concern. Estimated time to Kepler 442 system, 14 hours, 37 minutes. Current trajectory will take it through the most populated orbital zones. Projected casualties. Complete system sterilization. The humans listened to this exchange with growing alarm. Captain Taehyun stepped forward, his diplomatic training taking over despite the crisis. "Forgive my ignorance, but what exactly is a void harvester?" Admiral Krikstal turned to him, apparently forgetting his earlier dismissive attitude in the face of genuine terror. "Ancient weapons left over from a civilization that existed before most of our species achieved spaceflight. They were designed to strip entire solar systems of resources to fuel endless wars. When their creators died out, the machines continued their programming. Most were destroyed or lost, but apparently at least one survived." War Chief Grondar's armored fists clenched with rage and frustration. "The cursed things learn from every battle. Each time someone attacks them, they adapt their defenses and improve their weapons. Our ancestors fought them for centuries before finding ways to destroy them permanently." Shard singer Velenov's musical voice became a harsh, discordant wail. "The historical records say they can absorb matter and energy from destroyed ships to repair and upgrade themselves. Fighting them makes them stronger." Phasewalker Zillan solidified enough to speak clearly. "Yet we cannot simply let it reach the colonies. 2 billion lives cannot be sacrificed without a fight." The alien commanders looked at each other with grim determination. Despite their earlier competition and bragging, they all understood the gravity of the situation. This was no longer about showing off their superior technology. This was about preventing a massacre on an unimaginable scale. Admiral Krikstal began issuing orders to his fleet. The Vorthic Empire will engage first. Our plasma weapons can at least damage its outer hull. If we can disable its propulsion systems, we might buy time for evacuation of the colonies. War Chief Grondar's rumbling voice carried across the command center. Titanforge battle stations will provide support fire. Our siege cannons should be able to penetrate even ancient armor if we concentrate our firepower. Shardsinger Velenoth's crystal form brightened as she prepared for battle. Crystalline prison dreadnoughts will attempt to overload its power systems with focused energy beams. If we can cause cascading failures in its internal systems, it might shut down long enough for permanent destruction. Phasewalker Zilin flickered between visible and invisible as she planned her attack. Quantum Ghost Fleet will strike from multiple dimensions simultaneously. Even if it adapts to our weapons, it cannot adapt to attacks from spaces that do not exist in its reality. Nexus 7's mechanical voice gained what might have been enthusiasm. Biomechanical Leviathans will analyze its adaptive capabilities in real time. If we can understand how it learns and evolves, we might find ways to exploit its learning algorithms against it. The 5 alien fleets began moving into position, their earlier rivalry forgotten in the face of a common threat. Hundreds of ships representing the most advanced military technology in the galaxy prepared for a battle that would determine the fate of billions of innocent civilians. Captain Taehyun watched the preparations with obvious concern. Commander. Sojin stepped closer to him and spoke in a low voice that the aliens could not hear. Sir? Should we contact Admiral Choi? Captain Taehyun considered this carefully. The human fleet was nearby, but it consisted of only 12 ships compared to the hundreds that the alien species were deploying. Their technology had been thoroughly dismissed as primitive and ineffective. What could they possibly contribute? To a battle of this magnitude? Not yet, he replied quietly. Let us see how the situation develops first. Engineer Wu Bin overheard this exchange and looked up from his calculations. His datapad now showed complex projections based on the Void Harvester's specifications and the alien fleet compositions. Captain, he said softly, the energy readings from that machine are interesting. Its adaptive capabilities seem to be based on analyzing and countering the specific technologies it encounters. Commander Sojin raised an eyebrow. Meaning? Meaning. It learns to defend against whatever attacks it, but it can only adapt to technologies it has data about. Its programming is based on the assumption that all weapons will use advanced energy manipulation or exotic matter states. Captain Taehyun began to understand where his engineer was going with this analysis. And if it encountered something completely outside its database, then it would have no existing protocols to draw from. It would have to create new defensive systems from scratch, which would take time. The 3 humans exchanged meaningful looks while the aliens continued their battle preparations. Around them, the greatest military minds in the galaxy were planning an assault using the most sophisticated weapons ever created. Plasma cannons that burned hotter than stars, crystal arrays that could focus starlight into cutting beams, living weapons that evolved during combat, dimensional attacks from impossible angles, and siege guns powerful enough to crack moons. All of them were technologies that the Void Harvester had likely encountered before during its millions of years of operation. All of them were exactly the types of advanced systems that it was designed to analyze and counter. Admiral Krikstal's voice boomed across the command center as he finalized his battle plan. Combined fleet will engage the target in 47 minutes. All civilian vessels must clear the combat zone immediately. This creature has waited millions of years to feed again. We will not let it feast on innocent lives. The alien commanders radiated confidence despite their fear. They had overwhelming numerical superiority, advanced technology, and the element of surprise. The Void Harvester was powerful, But it was still just one ancient machine against the combined might of 5 galactic civilizations. Captain Tehayan quietly activated his personal communicator and sent a coded message to the human fleet. The transmission was brief and would mean nothing to alien ears, but Admiral Choi would understand its significance. "We are observing the situation," he transmitted, standing by for further orders. War Chief Grondar noticed the human captain's communication and looked over with what might have been pity. "Captain Park, you should evacuate your ships immediately. This battle will be far too dangerous for vessels with your limited defensive capabilities." "We appreciate your concern," Captain Tehain replied diplomatically. "However, we prefer to remain and observe. We might learn something useful." Shardsinger Velanoth's crystal voice chimed with what sounded like genuine worry. "This is not a training exercise or demonstration. The Void Harvester will destroy anything in its path, without discrimination. Your small ships would not survive even the background radiation from our weapons." Phase Walker Zilen flickered into solidity long enough to address the humans directly. "There is no shame in retreat when facing an enemy beyond your capabilities. Wisdom sometimes means knowing when not to fight." The aliens clearly intended their words as kindness, but the humans could hear the underlying assumption that humanity was too weak and primitive to contribute anything meaningful to the coming battle. The combined alien fleet moved into battle formation like a deadly ballet performed in space. Hundreds of ships from 5 different civilizations arranged themselves in precise patterns, each species taking positions that would maximize their unique advantages. The sight was breathtaking, a display of coordinated military power unlike anything the galaxy had seen in centuries. Admiral Crixtol S. Vorthak fleet took the lead position. 50 Devastator-class battleships formed a wall of plasma cannons, their weapons already glowing with barely contained stellar fire. Behind them, the massive Titanforge battle stations of War Chief Grondar moved into support positions, their siege cannons charging with enough energy to crack planets. The crystalline, prismed dreadnoughts of Shardsinger Velanoth spread out in geometric patterns that turned their formation into a living work of art. Light danced between their crystal hulls as they prepared to focus starlight into cutting beams sharp enough to slice through dimensions. Phase Walker Zilen-S Quantum Ghost Fleet flickered in and out of reality around the edges of the formation, ready to strike from impossible angles. Nexus 7's biomechanical leviathans hung back slightly, their living hulls pulsing with organic weapons that could adapt to any situation. These ships would analyze the enemy's capabilities and evolve new attacks in real time. The human ships remained at a safe distance, their simple gray hulls almost invisible against the starfield. Captain Tehayan watched the alien preparations through his ship's basic sensors while Engineer Wu Bin continued his calculations and Commander So Jin studied the tactical displays. The Void Harvester approached steadily, its ancient hull scarred by millions of years of battle and cosmic radiation. It made no attempt to communicate or negotiate. It simply moved forward with mechanical precision, driven by programming that recognized only one imperative: harvest matter and energy to continue. Its endless mission, Admiral Crixtall's echoed across all fleet communication channels. "All vessels, engage target at maximum range, fire at will." The battle began with a spectacular display of advanced weaponry. 50 Vorthak plasma cannons fired simultaneously, sending streams of superheated matter racing across space toward the ancient machine. The plasma burned so hot it was visible even in vacuum, creating brilliant lines of destruction that could melt asteroids. The Void Harvester's hull absorbed the first plasma strikes without apparent damage. Its ancient armor had been designed to withstand exactly this type of attack. But as more plasma beams struck its surface, sections began to glow and eventually melt away. The alien commanders cheered as their weapons carved deep wounds in the machine's hull. War Chief Grondar's siege cannons added their firepower to the assault. Massive kinetic projectiles accelerated to tremendous speeds slammed into the Harvester's damaged sections, punching through armor and creating explosive decompression in internal chambers. Secondary explosions rippled along the machine's surface as critical systems were damaged. "First blood to the Titan-forged Republic!" Grondar roared triumphantly. "Ancient armor means nothing against modern weapons." Shardsinger Velenoth's prism. Dreadnoughts joined the attack with beams of focused light that cut through the Harvester's hull like surgical lasers. The crystal ships moved in perfect synchronization, their light beams intersecting to create patterns of devastating energy that sliced away entire sections of the machine's superstructure. Phase Walker. Zilon's ghost fleet struck from multiple dimensions simultaneously. Quantum torpedoes materialized inside the Harvester's hull, exploding in spaces that should have been impossible to reach. The dimensional attacks bypassed the machine's outer defenses entirely, causing internal damage that no armor could prevent. For the first hour of battle, it seemed like the aliens would achieve easy victory. The Void Harvester was taking massive damage from all directions. Its hull was scarred and broken, its weapon systems were offline, and its propulsion had slowed significantly. The combined firepower of 5 advanced civilizations was overwhelming even this ancient terror. The alien commanders congratulated each other on their superior tactics and technology. Admiral Krikstal boasted about the effectiveness of Vorthek plasma weapons. War Chief Grondar praised the unstoppable power of Titan-forged siege cannons. The other commanders added their own claims of superiority, but Engineer Wubin was watching his sensor readings with growing concern. The energy signatures from the Void Harvester were changing in ways that made no sense according to known physics. "Captain," he said quietly, "something is wrong. The machine's internal power systems are not just repairing themselves, they are improving." Captain Tehayun studied his engineer's data. Improving how? "It is analyzing each attack and developing specific countermeasures. Look at these readings. The sections that were damaged by plasma fire are now showing resistance patterns that should make them immune to similar attacks." Commander Sojin joined the conversation, her voice tense with realization. "It is learning from the battle." Their concerns proved justified within minutes. The Void Harvester's damaged hull began to regenerate, but not with the same materials as before. The new armor showed different composition readings, materials specifically designed to resist plasma weapons, kinetic impacts and energy beams. When Admiral Krikstal ordered another plasma barrage, the superheated matter struck the Harvester's new armor and was absorbed completely. The energy was channeled into the machine's power systems, actually making it stronger instead of damaging it. "Impossible!" Krikstal roared in frustration. "Nothing can absorb plasma fire of that intensity." War Chief Grondar's siege cannons fired again, sending massive projectiles toward the regenerating machine. But the Harvester's new armor incorporated reactive plating that exploded outward when struck, deflecting the kinetic impacts harmlessly into space. Shardsinger Velenoth's light beams struck surfaces that had been modified to refract and scatter the focused energy. Instead of cutting through the hull, the crystal weapons created beautiful but harmless light shows that accomplished nothing. Phase Walker. Zilon's dimensional attacks found their targets surrounded by quantum field generators that made the internal spaces inaccessible from other dimensions. The Ghost Fleet's most advanced weapons could no longer reach their intended targets. Only Nexus 7's biomechanical leviathans continued to cause damage, and only because their living weapons could evolve almost as quickly as the Harvester could adapt. But it was becoming clear that this was a losing battle. The ancient machine was learning faster than the organic ships could evolve. "All vessels concentrate fire on its propulsion systems," Admiral Krikstal ordered desperately. "If we cannot destroy it, perhaps we can at least stop it from reaching the colonies." The alien fleet focused their remaining effective weapons on the Harvester's engine sections. For a brief moment, it seemed like this new strategy might work. The machine's acceleration slowed as critical propulsion components were damaged, but within minutes, the Harvester had rerouted power through backup systems and begun repairing the damage with improved components. Its new engines were not only more efficient than the originals, they were also heavily armored against the specific weapons that had damaged them. Worse, the machine had begun to fight back. Weapon ports opened along its regenerated hull, revealing armaments that incorporated technology from all 5 alien species. Plasma cannons based on Vorthec designs but improved beyond recognition. Crystal arrays that focused energy more efficiently than anything the crystalline hegemony had created. Kinetic weapons that made Titanforge siege cannons look like toys. The Harvester's return fire was devastating. It had analyzed every ship in the alien fleet and developed specific weapons to counter each design. Vorthak shields collapsed under plasma fire that had been tuned to their exact frequency. Crystalline hulls shattered under energy beams that exploited microscopic flaws in their structure. Titanforge armor was pierced by projectiles moving at impossible speeds, the biomechanical. Leviathans tried to adapt to the new threats, but the Harvester had incorporated their own adaptive technology into its weapons. Every time the living ships evolved new defenses, the ancient machine evolved new attacks to counter them. Phasewalker Zillan's Ghost Fleet found itself under attack from weapons that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The Quantum Phantom's greatest advantage, their ability to phase between realities, was now being used against them by an enemy that had learned to fight in all realities at once. Within 3 hours of battle, the alien fleet was in full retreat. Ships that had been the pride of galactic civilization were now burning wrecks drifting through space. The survivors fled toward the edge of the system, their weapons useless against an enemy that had turned their own technology against them. Admiral Crystal's flagship limped away with 3 of its 4 main plasma cannons destroyed. War Chief Grondar's command station had lost half its armor plating and most of its siege guns. Shard Singer Velanoth's crystal form flickered with stress fractures as she watched her beautiful ships crack and shatter under impossible attacks. Phasewalker Zillan could barely maintain coherent form as the strain of dimensional combat overwhelmed her systems. Nexus 7's biomechanical components were fighting a losing battle against viral programs. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace like ghosts materializing from the void. 12 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. Their arrival so quiet and unremarkable that the fleeing alien vessels barely noticed them at first. When the aliens did see the human fleet, their reactions ranged from confusion to despair. These were the primitive ships they had mocked just hours earlier, small, boxy vessels with simple gray hulls and basic weapon systems. Against an enemy that had just destroyed hundreds of advanced warships, they looked like toys brought to fight a Titan. Admiral Krixtal's damaged flagship struggled to maintain communication as his 4 arms worked frantically over sparking control panels. Human vessels, retreat immediately. That machine has adapted to all our weapons. Your primitive technology will only feed its growth. War Chief Grondar's massive voice rumbled with desperate urgency over the communications channel. Captain Park, you do not understand what you face. The Harvester learns from every attack. It has already absorbed our most advanced weapons and turned them against us. Your kinetic projectiles will be useless. Shard Singer Velanoth's crystal form flickered with stress as she tried to warn the humans. Please, flee while you can. This creature has become something beyond our ability to fight. Do not throw away your lives in a hopeless gesture. Phasewalker Zillan's voice echoed from multiple dimensions simultaneously, filled with an urgency that transcended her usual cryptic manner. The machine now exists in several reality states at once. It can counter attacks from angles that should not exist. Your 3-dimensional weapons cannot touch it. Nexus 7's mechanical voice carried statistical certainty that made the warning even more chilling. Analysis indicates human weapons have 0 probability of success. The Harvester has incorporated all known weapon technologies. Engagement will result in total human fleet destruction within 4.7 minutes. Captain Taehyun listened to these warnings from his position on the bridge of the UES Indomitable, the flagship of humanity's small fleet. Around him, his crew worked with calm efficiency, their faces showing none of the panic that filled the alien communications. "Admiral Choi to all human vessels," came the steady voice of the fleet commander. "Battle stations. Prepare for engagement with hostile construct. All civilian vessels are to clear the combat zone immediately." Admiral Jinwoo Choi was a man in his 60s with gray hair and steady hands that had never shaken even during humanity's worst conflicts. He had fought in the Mars Rebellion, commanded fleets during the asteroid mining wars, and survived battles that had tested every limit of human endurance. His voice carried the quiet authority of someone who had faced impossible odds before and lived to talk about it. The alien commanders listened to this exchange with growing horror. The humans were actually planning to engage the Void Harvester directly, despite having witnessed the complete defeat of far superior forces. "Admiral Choi," Captain Tae Hyen transmitted from his observation ship, "we have detailed analysis of the enemy's capabilities and adaptive systems. The construct appears to counter advanced energy weapons and exotic technologies by incorporating their principles into its own design." "Understood, Captain. Have you identified any potential weaknesses?" Engineer Wu Bin's voice joined the conversation. "Sir, the machine's adaptive algorithms are designed to counter sophisticated weapon systems by analyzing their energy signatures and technological principles. However, our analysis suggests it may have difficulty adapting to weapons that operate on pure kinetic principles without advanced targeting or guidance systems." Commander So-Jin added her tactical assessment. "The construct has learned to counter plasma weapons, energy beams, quantum attacks, and biomechanical systems, but all of these rely on complex physics and exotic matter states. Simple kinetic impact at high velocity operates on basic physical laws that cannot be adapted to or countered." Admiral Choi's response was calm and measured. "Are you suggesting we engage with conventional weapons?" "Not conventional, sir," Wu Bin replied. "Simplified. Railguns firing solid tungsten penetrators at 15% light speed. Mass drivers launching dense metal projectiles with no guidance systems or energy signatures. Missile swarms with kinetic warheads and basic chemical propulsion." The alien commanders listened to this exchange with disbelief. The humans were planning to fight the most advanced enemy in galactic history, using weapons that most civilizations had abandoned thousands of years ago. Admiral Krickstall's voice crackled over the communications channel. "You cannot be serious? Simple kinetic weapons are useless against modern defenses. The Harvester will adapt its armor to deflect your projectiles." Admiral Choi's response carried the weight of absolute certainty. Admiral Krickstall, with respect, "You are thinking like someone who has forgotten the fundamental laws of physics. Kinetic energy equals 1/2 mass times velocity squared. A tungsten rod moving at 15% light speed carries the same destructive force regardless of what the target knows about tungsten rods." War Chief Grondar's massive voice carried desperate urgency. "But the machine will adapt. It will find ways to counter your attacks." "War Chief Grondar," Admiral Choi replied patiently, "how does one adapt to momentum? How does one counter the law of conservation of energy? The Harvester can learn to deflect energy beams or absorb plasma fire, but it cannot change the basic physics of mass and acceleration." Commander So-Jin transmitted additional tactical data. "The construct's adaptive systems are designed to analyze and counter technology, but kinetic impact is not technology, it is physics. You cannot program a defense against physics itself." The human fleet began moving toward the Void Harvester with steady, methodical precision. There was no dramatic acceleration, no flashy displays of advanced propulsion technology. The 12 ships simply accelerated at a constant rate, their simple chemical rockets pushing them forward with reliable, predictable thrust. Engineer Wu Bin's voice carried technical details that the aliens could barely comprehend. "Human weapons are designed for reliability and simplicity. Railguns with electromagnetic acceleration, no exotic matter or dimensional manipulation. Mass drivers using basic gravitational principles. Missiles with chemical explosives and kinetic penetrators. Shard singer Velenov's crystal voice rang with musical desperation. But your weapons lack the power of our energy systems. How can simple kinetic force compare to stellar-level plasma or focused starlight? Captain Tehayan's response carried a hint of dry humor. Shard singer Velenov, a dinosaur-killing asteroid, had no plasma cannons or energy beams. It was just a very large rock moving very fast. Sometimes simple solutions are the most effective. The Void Harvester had noticed the approaching human fleet and was analyzing the new threats. Its sensors scanned the primitive ships, cataloging their simple weapon systems and basic defensive capabilities. According to its databases, these vessels posed no significant danger. The ancient machine had encountered similar technologies millions of years ago, when younger civilizations still relied on kinetic weapons. It had developed countermeasures for such primitive attacks long before most current species had achieved SPACFLIGT. But as the Harvester prepared its standard anti-kinetic defenses, it encountered something unexpected. The human weapons were not just simple kinetic projectiles. They were kinetic projectiles, accelerated to velocities that the machine had never recorded in its extensive combat database. Admiral Troy's voice carried across all fleet channels as the human ships reached optimal firing range. All vessels, you are cleared to engage. Target the construct's central mass. Continuous fire, maximum rate. Show this machine what happens when an unstoppable force meets a movable object. The human fleet opened fire with weapons that looked laughably primitive compared to the exotic technologies the aliens had deployed. Railguns fired solid tungsten rods with no guidance systems or exotic enhancements. Mass drivers hurled dense metal spheres using simple electromagnetic acceleration. Missile launchers sent swarms of chemically propelled warheads toward their target, but these primitive weapons carried kinetic energies that defied belief. Tungsten penetrators moving at 15% of light speed struck the Harvester's hull. With the force of nuclear weapons, mass driver projectiles punched through armor that had shrugged off plasma cannons. Chemical explosives that should have been useless against advanced materials created devastating secondary damage when delivered by projectiles. Carrying impossible momentum, the Void Harvester's adaptive systems tried desperately to analyze and counter these attacks. It strengthened its armor against kinetic impact, but the human projectiles simply punched through the stronger materials with even more devastating effect. It deployed energy fields to deflect incoming projectiles, but kinetic energy at these velocities could not be deflected, only absorbed or transferred. For the first time in millions of years, the ancient machine encountered weapons that its adaptive algorithms could not counter. It could analyze the tungsten composition of human penetrators, but that knowledge was useless when the tungsten was moving fast enough to punch through any known material. It could calculate the explosive yield of chemical warheads, but those warheads were being delivered by. The battle raged for another 2 hours, but it was unlike any combat the galaxy had ever witnessed. There were no spectacular energy displays, no exotic particle beams cutting through space, no dimensional attacks from impossible angles, just 12 human ships methodically pounding an ancient enemy with weapons that operated on the most basic principles of physics. Admiral Jinwoo Choi coordinated the assault with mathematical precision that impressed even the defeated alien commanders. Each human ship had been assigned specific target zones on the Void Harvester's massive hull, and they maintained their fire patterns with clockwork regularity. UES Retribution, adjust targeting to Grid 77 Alpha, Admiral Choi commanded. UES Vengeance, concentrate on the propulsion manifolds. UES Defiance, continue bombardment of the Central Processing Core. Commander Hyjin Park aboard the Retribution acknowledged the orders while her weapons crews reloaded their railguns with fresh tungsten penetrators. Copy that, Admiral. Shifting fire to new coordinates. We're seeing significant structural damage in the target zone. Captain Dongmin Yoon on the Vengeance reported similar success. Direct hits on the propulsion systems, sir. The constructs. Acceleration has dropped by 30% and continues to decrease. The human fleet worked as a single, coordinated entity, each ship supporting the others in a complex dance of destruction that left no openings for counterattack. When one vessel needed to reload or reposition, another would increase its rate of fire to maintain constant pressure on the target. The Void Harvester fought back with weapons that incorporated the best technology from all 5 alien civilizations, but its return fire was increasingly ineffective. The human ships used simple evasive maneuvers and basic armor plating rather than energy shields or exotic defenses, giving the ancient machine nothing sophisticated to analyze and counter. When plasma beams struck human hulls, the simple steel and ceramic armor either absorbed the heat or was replaced by automated repair systems. When exotic energy weapons hit human ships, they found no complex systems to disrupt, just basic mechanical components that continued functioning even when damaged. Engineer Wu Bin's voice carried excitement as he analyzed the battle data. The construct's learning algorithms are becoming overloaded. It keeps trying to develop countermeasures for weapons that have no countermeasures. You cannot outsmart momentum. The alien commanders watched this methodical destruction with a mixture of awe and humiliation. Their advanced civilizations had been defeated by an enemy that had learned from their own technology, but the primitive humans were winning by using technology so basic that there was nothing for the enemy to learn from. Admiral Crystal's voice carried grudging respect. Your coordination is remarkable, Admiral Choi. Each ship moves as if it knows exactly what the others will do. Admiral Choi's response revealed something fundamental about human military philosophy. We train constantly for exactly this type of engagement, Admiral. Human wars have taught us that individual heroics mean nothing if the unit fails. Every human fleet operates as a single weapon system with multiple firing platforms. War Chief. Grondar's massive voice rumbled with newfound understanding. You fight like a machine, but with organic adaptability. Each ship is a component in a larger organism. Not quite, War Chief, Admiral Choi corrected. We fight like humans who have learned that survival depends on working together perfectly. Every crew member knows their role, every ship knows its position, every weapon knows its target. There is no confusion, no hesitation, no individual decision-making to slow our response. Shardsinger Velenov's crystal voice carried a note of wonder. But how do you maintain such coordination without quantum communication systems or psychic links? Commander Sojin answered from the observation ship. Practice, Shardsinger. Endless, repetitive practice until every possible scenario becomes automatic response. Human military training assumes that advanced technology will fail when you need it most, so we train to fight with basic equipment and simple communication. The Void Harvester was learning this lesson the hard way. Its adaptive systems had been designed to counter sophisticated threats by incorporating their technology and turning it against them. But human weapons had no technology to steal, just mass, velocity, and the immutable laws of physics. As the ancient machine's hull continued to crack. Under the relentless kinetic bombardment, it attempted increasingly desperate countermeasures. It strengthened its armor, but denser materials just provided better momentum transfer for human projectiles. It deployed energy fields, but kinetic weapons at these velocities punched through energy barriers like they weren't there. The machine even tried to adapt human weapons for its own use, but it discovered something that its creators had never anticipated. Human weapons were not just simple, they were simple by design. Every component had been engineered for reliability, maintainability, and effectiveness rather than sophistication. When the Harvester attempted to improve human railgun designs, it found that the improvements made the weapons less reliable. When it tried to enhance human targeting systems, it discovered that the enhancements introduced failure points that reduced accuracy. Human weapons were already optimized, not for impressiveness, but for getting the job done. Captain Tehain observed this battle with professional satisfaction. The aliens had mocked human primitive technology, but they had never understood that primitive did not mean inferior. Sometimes the simplest solution was the most elegant. Engineer Wu Bin's voice carried technical analysis that the aliens were beginning to appreciate. The construct's power systems are failing under cascading damage. Our kinetic impacts are causing structural failures that its repair systems cannot compensate for quickly enough. Admiral Choi made the tactical decision that would end the battle. All vessels, prepare for synchronized bombardment of the central core. We will concentrate every weapon on a single point and deliver maximum kinetic energy in the shortest possible time. The 12 human ships adjusted their positions with practiced precision, forming a perfect sphere around the damaged void harvester. Each vessel calculated firing solutions that would put every projectile on exactly the same target coordinates within a window of less than 3 seconds. Final weapons check, Admiral Choi commanded. This engagement will determine whether 2 billion civilians live or die. I want every railgun, every mass driver, and every missile launcher ready for synchronized fire. The weapons crews across the human fleet completed their preparations with mechanical efficiency. Tungsten penetrators were loaded and charged to maximum velocity. Mass driver projectiles were positioned and targeted. Missile swarms received their final targeting updates. Phasewalker. Zilan's voice carried across the communication channels with something approaching reverence. Admiral Choi, we are witnessing something unprecedented. Your species is about to accomplish what the combined fleets of 5 civilizations could not. Admiral Choi's response carried the weight of human determination. Phasewalker, we learned long ago that the universe does not care about our limitations. It only cares about results. Today we will deliver results. Nexus 7's mechanical voice provided final calculations. Target structural integrity at 17% and falling. Concentrated kinetic bombardment at the indicated coordinates. Has 94.7% probability of achieving core destruction. All vessels, Admiral Choi announced, you are cleared for final bombardment. Fire on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. Every human weapon fired simultaneously. Railguns sent tungsten penetrators racing toward the target at impossible velocities. Mass drivers hurled dense projectiles with computer-calculated precision. Missile swarms converged on a single point with devastating synchronized impact. The combined kinetic energy of the human fleet's entire arsenal struck the Void Harvester's core in less than 3 seconds. The ancient machine, which had survived for millions of years by adapting to every weapon the galaxy could produce, was destroyed by weapons so simple that adaptation was impossible. The explosion was visible across several star systems as the Harvester's power core underwent catastrophic failure. Millions of years of accumulated matter and energy were released in a burst of light that temporarily outshone nearby stars. When the light faded, nothing remained of the ancient threat, except expanding clouds of debris that would eventually become part of the cosmic dust between stars. The alien commanders sat in stunned silence as they processed what they had witnessed. Their most advanced weapons had been useless against an enemy that learned from their technology, but humanity had succeeded by using weapons so basic that there was nothing to learn from them. Admiral Krikstal was the first to break the silence. Admiral Choi, the Vorthek Empire owes humanity a debt that can never be repaid. You have saved billions of lives using methods we never would have considered. War Chief Grondar's rumbling voice carried newfound respect. I have fought for centuries and seen every form of warfare the galaxy knows. Today I learned that sometimes the oldest ways are still the best ways. Shard Singer Velenov's crystal form rang with harmonious tones of gratitude. Your species has shown us that elegance lies not in complexity, but in perfect simplicity applied with absolute precision. Phasewalker,